Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the SMC Journal Show. I am Scott Moore, your host, and I'm so glad that you could be with me. If you're not familiar with this show, we talk about anything involving the tech industry: software development, infrastructure, testing, tuning, observability, monitoring your hardware and software, all the things, right? AI, security. And today, I'm going to talk to you about something that I've mentioned in conferences for years. I've mentioned in articles, but I've never really brought to you on this program before. And it's the topic is, what is a software lifecycle engineer, and is it time for that role to rise up in IT today? And so this goes back to an article that I wrote on LinkedIn several years ago, and I'm going to bring that up for you now. It's called, Do You Need an SDET or Do You Need a SEAL? Now, I've since changed the name of the SEAL, SEAL, to SRE. That original title was Software Engineer Across the Lifecycle, and I've shortened it to Software Lifecycle Engineer. So when you hear me talk about the SEAL or the SLE, it's the exact same thing. So you can see I wrote this article in November of 2017. A lot of people have viewed this over the years, and I share it every once in a while just so that I can keep people current on what I'm thinking about as far as this term. And people read that, and a lot of people agreed with me. But as sometimes happens, I find myself in an echo chamber and nobody ever listens to me and nobody does anything. It's because I'm not Google and I'm not the latest, greatest thing that's going on talking about whatever. But I want to revisit this, and I'd like to get your thoughts in the comments in this video below, or if you're watching this on LinkedIn or some other, and there's some comments, give me your feedback on this. I think this is important because based on what you tell me, maybe I stop talking about this altogether, or maybe we make this a part of Dev Perf and the Dev Perf Foundation. I'll let you decide. So let's get into it. What are the current industry approaches right now towards shifting left and dealing with performance engineering in the software engineering realm, the software development realm? There are two roles that I see, and there's obviously more titles than this, but two major roles that have kind of come up in the ranks over the last 10 years or so since I've been talking about this. And one of them, I'll go ahead and bring this up, one of them is called the SDET, the Software Development Engineer in Test. And that was a term that was phrased by Microsoft. There's a book written about this. It's called How We Test Software at Microsoft by Alan Page, Ken Johnson, and BJ Rollison. And I'll put a link to that on the show notes. Google has a title called the Site Reliability Engineer. And this is a role that was coined by Google, and there's several articles out there. I can share a few of those online as well so you can find out. But this is a list of the things that characterize what those roles do. So think about an SDET as a developer that's in test who has the skills of a developer. Why they would think that somebody who isn't quote unquote a developer title doesn't have development skills just because they're in QA is beyond me. But they have a QA mindset. Now, that's kind of a red flag to me because I've met a lot of developers, and it's harder to find a developer with a QA mindset, in my experience, than it is to find a QA person with no development skills. Okay, so you're already sensing my bias here. It's a known bias. This SDET would also have domain knowledge of the software that's being created and delivered. They're also supposed to be a customer advocate. So they're supposed to understand the business and the user of that software better than most, and can build their own tools to fix their own problems if they needed to from a development side if you're shifting left. In other words, they don't even need to buy some fancy, say, load testing tool. They'll just code it. Or maybe now they'll just vibe code it with AI, right? That's what an SDET is supposed to be. On the other hand, the site reliability engineer was originally supposed to be 50% development resource and 50% operational resource. So they're total going across the whole DevOps delivery spectrum. They are the find it, fix it folks. And they are the one that satisfies those DevOps pillars, removes those silos out of the way. Their whole goal is to make automation the savior of the company by automating everything, then putting telemetry around everything everything. Asking those questions through observability. How is our business doing? How is our service doing? If it's not doing well, why is that? Map out where we need to fix it and automate anything that's tedious so that we remove the toil out of our organization. Now, I've seen that role implemented well, and I've seen it implemented not so well. For example, Google in the early days, if they found a person that was spending 90% of their time in development and 10% in operations, for whatever reason, they would take them out of the SRE team and put them into development, because obviously that's what you're doing, that's your job. And so unless you change the behavior of the person to force them to be 50-50, which may not work out, that doesn't work. But I don't know of a lot of site reliability engineers that are like evenly spread. They're mostly operations, but they have the tech skills to write some automation code and some other things. And they have almost become, in some instances, some have gone down a rabbit trail of making them almost like third tier tech support on call. This thing gets bad and you need to write a new driver in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. You could, those kind of tech skills, which is great. Okay. Get it. Those roles are absolutely needed in today's world. And when we have ephemeral environments and things are always changing, we have serverless, we have server mesh, we have all these things that we didn't have. Well, we had them, but they weren't in the forefront 10 years ago. We definitely need those roles. However, there are still issues that we have to deal with. So I know some people are not going to like this, but I'm telling you the truth from 30 years of experience in meeting people in hundreds of companies across the world. Developers in general, I know I'm making generalized statements. Developers still make horrible testers. It takes a testing mindset and a person who with passion who likes to test to be a good tester. Developers also make horrible operations people in general. Developers also in general make horrible customer advocates. I've even had a conversation with several developers where I said, okay, for a moment, put your business hat on. And I was stopped in the middle of that going, you don't understand how hard that is for me. And I'm thinking, if you're developing a product for a customer and you can't put that customer hat on to think about what I'm doing and how that will affect the business and how that will affect the end user, we have bigger problems here, right? But that's not all. There are silos that exist today. I recently even asked this question out on LinkedIn. Do we still have that silo issue between QA and tester when we have SDETs, when we have DevOps, when we have continuous delivery? Everybody's agile. We're all in the same room. We're all doing the stand-ups. But I find that more than not, those silos in some respects still exist. Is it everywhere? No. In general, there are people and who understand all of this. We call them unicorns and purple squirrels. And most of those people are making very good salaries at very large companies like Google, like Meta, like Alphabet. And they are paid well for that knowledge that they have. But in real life, where all of us live, is everybody on that scale? Probably not. And how many have you personally met? I have met a few, and they're great people. There's just not enough of them out there. And I don't think we can make that expectation for everybody out there that they would be that role. I don't think you can build a company based on purple squirrels. And I don't think we should bet, I call it betting the farm on, I don't think we should bet our company, because everybody, in my opinion, whatever role you're at, you're a hero. Okay. But we can't build the company on heroes. We need everyday heroes to build our company and scale it out, right? These are Scott Moore's opinion. Your mileage may vary. Comments below, comments below. And there are other titles other than the SDET and the SRE that handle the job and the task of addressing performance in software, right? Here are a few additional titles: software quality engineer, software or systems engineer, performance engineer, performance tester, performance architects. And I've got system engineer there twice. That should have been a software engineer. Sorry for that misspelling. I want to introduce you to this new concept in today's show, and it is the idea of a software lifecycle engineer, or the SLE. And I'm going to explain where I believe this role sits. I don't necessarily think it's for everybody. I don't necessarily think it's a purple squirrel, but I think it requires several years of experience and across a scope and a landscape of technologies. You got to have experience across the board here to be able to do this. And this is where we go from maybe just being a performance tester to a performance engineer to a lifecycle engineer that focuses on performance. I don't think a lifecycle engineer has to know everything. There is an idea out there that SREs and now even developers and platformers, you have to know everything about everything. It's impossible these days, folks. There's not enough way to cram that stuff in your brain. Oh, we'll just type it into ChatGPT and it'll help us out and be a force multiplier. If you don't understand the context of what you're doing in there, you are going to run across technical debt in the future. I guarantee you. It's just I've been there, I've seen it, right? So what is a software lifecycle engineer? Here's an example of the traditional lifecycle. We used to just have 3 circles here for dev, test, and operations, but I think I first got this from Dynatrace, and I noticed that all of these are iterative approaches. This is all about continuous delivery. You have a development environment, you have a test environment where normally performance is typically started from. You're shifting left as much as you can in development and doing performance testing as a developer on your feature sets, but your scope should end there. You should have performance and test as part of QA. So your performance tester would handle both development and the traditional testing environment, right? Now we have people testing in production, which is fine. You have DevOps and an SDET that operates on all 3 of those, the development, the testing, and the operations. They can go across that, find, fix things, automate, etc., remove the toil. But notice I also have that far right circle. That's where the business sits. And this is where the software lifecycle engineer would play in addition to those other environments. So when I mentioned about the shifting left and the developer's role, it's all about, like, we could say, is everybody responsible for quality? Yes. Is everybody responsible for performance? Yes. Is everybody responsible for security? Yes. Well, you get all these responsibilities. I have no problem with adding responsibilities to people, but the depth of responsibility, I think that's the key, and that's where I sometimes uh, get division in the camps between specialist and generalist. And this, to me, it just works when you talk about medical. Like, you go to a general practitioner for your doctor for certain things that you would not go to a specialist for brain surgery, heart surgery, etc. There's certain skill sets that need to be there. And I think there'll always be a need for performance to be a niche skill set like that brain surgery, because you have to know a lot of technologies, but you have to know a very narrow scope. Now, back to these responsibilities. Developers' responsibility for performance should be limited to the code that they're writing, the feature that they're implementing. And at some point in the testing realm, the testers should be, if they're not the same role, if they're not the developer, should be looking at how all those features perform together and look at the more integrated piece. And then your performance engineers would be part of that. Performance engineers would then be able to even reach into operations without even running a test, be able to use tools. Maybe that's observability tools. Maybe it's browser tools. Whatever it might be, it's looking real time at the situation and figuring out how to engineer a performance solution and finding those things without necessarily running something under load, because there's a lot of performance defects that we find that have nothing to do with load. It's bad for a single iteration, right? Single user, single thread. And then the software lifecycle engineer, where they play a new role, is they have to also keep in mind how all of this performance software, how it's delivered, impacts the end user, and they always keep the end user experience in top of mind. So we could have somebody saying, from a development standpoint, I've created the fastest code that ever lived. Your network engineers and systems engineers may be saying, yes, and the network is completely wide open and we have no bandwidth issues. And the database engineer is saying, yes, and every query is taking milliseconds, 1 millisecond for anything you ever do on the database. We've got it completely optimized. Great. But if the end user is still seeing an hourglass running around, the SLE says, don't care. We got to look at this thing as a holistic piece and figure out. And sometimes we're talking about healthcare, sometimes that happens in healthcare too. There are doctors who focus on their little piece of the equation trying to treat some kind of human illness, not realizing that they have to deal with the body as a holistic organism and thinking, maybe if this guy quit eating so many Big Macs or junk food and maybe walked 30 minutes a day and started drinking some water, it wouldn't be, his problem wouldn't be a lack of all these pills that I'm giving him every 6 months to renew his prescription. Yeah, that's a different story, but I think that's a good analogy to look at our systems holistically, and the software lifecycle engineer would have that end user experience. How is the end user experience overall doing? And they would use observability to answer those questions and then be able to deep dive. Now, the software engineer, lifecycle engineer, it looks like I've given them all this responsibility. Well, I've given them responsibility over large amounts of systems and environments, but their focus is very narrow. They only should be caring about performance. At least if we had an SLE that specialized in performance, maybe that's a schlep. I don't know. So there could be a software lifecycle engineer that's also over security. So where would these sit in an agile? Like if you were trying to do scaled agile framework, are people still even doing SAFe anymore? I don't know. If they are, there is the idea and the concept of a systems team, and I believe that's where an SLE would sit, or multiple SLEs. One would be over performance, one could be over security, one you could have somebody over accessibility and the UI and those kind of things. But I think there's a natural limit there for those operational requirements that need to be met. Notice I didn't say non-functional. Never say non-functional. So let's just look at what I feel. Again, this is Scott Moore's opinion. This is the difference in what a software lifecycle engineer would be like, characteristics, and what they would be doing. So a software lifecycle engineer, remember, you could apply this to multiple things. One could be over performance, one could be over security. They would need strong analytical skills and problem-solving abilities. They would have to have a lot of automation experience with multiple technologies. They could handle legacy stuff like Citrix or green screen automation, not just the latest HTTP variant of whatever you're doing, REST calls and APIs. Strong understanding of the technology stack, how the whole system works, not just one piece, not just I know the Linux operating system, but I don't understand the database system. Not that you have to know everything, but you have to know a lot about it. You have to understand infrastructure, networks, the app servers, protocol, the underlying protocols. And that's what I see missing in roles today that are even SREs and even SDETs. SDETs may understand HTTP very well, but they don't necessarily understand the other, dozen protocols that are happening in their company today. And they have to have that life cycle approach. They always have to keep the business and the end user in mind. They can easily put that hat on. And the kinds of things that they do, all the way from requirements to testing and automation, monitoring whatever environment, correlating, looking at analysis. They can also provide mentoring and training to other teams. Not that they're a professional coach or professional educator, but they can go across to other teams and say, hey, developer, I know that you're struggling with performance. Let me tell you how to approach it for your limited scope. They also help implement some of the best practices and standards for your company, setting up software SLOs, for example, and SLAs in your contracts, hopefully. And I also are very good at helping to find root cause analysis and performance bottlenecks across systems, not just, this little level right here. And I would think nowadays there would be a component of understanding how to use AI and machine learning to spot performance bottlenecks and trends that are going haywire in these tools that they use. Having AI help them out to pinpoint those areas and advise the team, advise the developers, and advise upper management, how big of a risk is this performance defect that we found, and should we risk rolling this next version out to production? Is there a showstopper, and how do we know? A lot of those things, those tasks currently roll into some of those other titles, but I believe that there is a need for a software lifecycle engineer with a specialty in performance and a specialty in security. Security can roll up into CISO, and the SLE over performance, I'm not really sure where they roll up into other than the CTO, because I don't see a role who really understands performance any better than that, or it has that level of responsibility. And again, lots of responsibility with a very narrow focus across those systems. So that's my spiel, and I've been talking about this since I called it the SEAL, and a lot of people were like, "You're equating an IT role to a military SEAL for the Navy of the U.S. Navy," and that really wasn't my intention. Although those guys are really cool, and if I wanted to be associated with anybody, that's who I'd want to be associated with. Um, but I want to know what you think about this. Is it time for the SLE to be a thing in an organization, or are organizations just not ready for this? We talk about moving on from old ideas like the center of excellence. We no longer need a performance center of excellence, because that really all the center of excellence was a really good internal consulting group that was formed inside of a larger company and helped create the standards that the company operated on for that thing, that performance. Those things still need to be done. Performance engineering, I'm seeing a lot of performance engineer titles and performance tester titles kind of disappearing these days. I'm even seeing companies forego the need for load testing and just say, we'll just throw stuff up in the cloud, we'll start doing auto scaling, but we'll also implement strong observability techniques to find and fix these performance bottlenecks so our cloud bill doesn't get so high. So why do load testing if you don't plan to really scale that fast? Why don't we just use observability to bring the cloud bill down over time? Maybe that's better than investing in load testing and holding up being able to put this product out. I mean, we've got a changing world here, and we've got to change along with it. I believe the SLE is actually needed more than ever, but that work is still going to be done. Whether you call yourself a site reliability engineer or an SDET or whatever you call yourself, performance will need to be addressed. If it's not addressed now, it's going to have to be addressed later as technical debt, or it's going to be an uh-oh, we just saw a very high bill on the cloud because we did not optimize this code. So one of those situations is going to happen. Who's going to do it? Doesn't matter really what the title is, but I felt like this was a better way to define what that title was, the characteristics were, and what they would do. But I would like to know what you think. You can reach out to me several ways. I am available through most of the online social media platforms, but LinkedIn is probably the most prominent where I'm usually at, because I'm always talking about this stuff on business sites. But you can also email me at heyscott@smcjournal.com. And if you like this kind of content, it would be so awesome if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is always growing. You can scan the QR code, go to that URL, or you may be on the YouTube channel right now. But I've found that in the statistics, many of you are watching the show, probably 60% or more, and you are not subscribed. So wouldn't you want to know when there are new episodes? If you ring that bell, I'm always putting out new stuff all the time. And there's probably classic episodes of this show that you may not have watched. And by being subscribed to the channel, you can kind of go through those things. And I even have playlists where I have some music parody videos and funny videos that aren't as technical as this, but some people are interested in those as well. So you can check those out too. But let me know the kind of content that you want to see, and if you like this, and even if you disagree with me, that's great. Just put some stuff in the comments and let me know. And how should this content change over this year? I want to make this something that you would love to watch. But thank you for watching today's show, and we'll see you on the next SMC Journal. I'm Scott Moore. Bye-bye.